Hi, and good evening, afternoon, or morning to everyone, wherever you are. And today I'm going to be having a quick discussion about some research I came across on LinkedIn with Professor Erwin Lowe from Australia. And the question is, could severe COVID-19 and long COVID be a disease of the gut? So before I start that, I'd just like to remind everyone that I definitely want you to join me on Substack. I'll just ask you to click on the link below, and that's where you'll be able to share loads of posts, podcasts, and videos. This is what it looks like on Substack for me. Here is the post that I've done today on usual COVID-19 facts about hypertension, anxiety and fear disorders, the comorbid pandemic, Africa and Omicron. So there's lots of information there that would be of value to you. And so in that context, I'd like you to join me and let's see what we can learn on Substack. So back to our topic today with regards to the post that I was sharing you about that came from Professor Erwin Lowe. This is Professor Lowe here. He's from Australia, and he shares some very, very interesting articles that he comes across. This is a preprint, and it's about gastrointestinal symptoms. I'll show you the preprint here. It's a pre-proof gastrointestinal symptoms and fecal shedding of SARS-CoV2 RNA suggest prolonged gastrointestinal infection. And that's the pre-proof of what they're showing. And we have here the image of really what they were doing. The journal article, it came from Arvind Natajara, which is Stanford University. So most of the research had come from there. And so they're sharing about this gastrointestinal symptoms. And you can see the picture here of a person with their organs shown, the lungs up here, and let me get myself out of the way, the lungs up here, a liver, and then you can see the large bowel and the small bowel in the middle. They have been looking at fecal samples, and they've been monitoring it, looking for RNA of the virus in fecal samples. What they've found is quite remarkable. So the respiratory samples peak at about day 7, and then they fall off quite quickly by about 2 weeks. But at 2 weeks is where we have the peak of the virus in the intestine, because they're finding this in fecal samples. It then takes a very long time, up to 300 days sometimes, but primarily by about 28 days, the levels have fallen off associated with the infection. With the fecal shedding, they've found that there are lots of GI symptoms, and they are thinking that the GI tract or the intestine is a potential site of SARS-CoV2 infection. I would completely agree with this point. And I think that on balance, when I look at our research, we have been convinced that in effect, what we are seeing with COVID-19, certainly severe disease and long COVID, it's primarily a disease of the gut. A really important point, and something that it's taken me some time to get around to, but I think that this paper here has really reinforced that point, where I could see that certainly what we found in terms of severe COVID-19, one of the most unusual things was that the IgA response, and IgA is usually from mucosal surfaces, so that could be the upper respiratory tract or in terms of the intestines. But the IgA response was very high and very early in COVID-19. And we do know that the virus goes first to the lungs and then spreads to the intestines. And the research here is therefore very, very suggestive that what we've got is prolonged infection in some cases. And you can see the peak 28 days going all the way down to there. Part of the research I've been focused on, and this is part of a project I'm doing with regards to long COVID. And what you can see here is that I've got a picture here of overactive gut inflammation. And so if you're interested in long COVID, this is likely to be coming out as a course soon, where I'm trying to see if I can help people to understand a little bit more about the disease. And the focus in that is about the gut inflammation. And here we have histamine or mast cells producing histamines, natural killer cells, cytokines, plasma cells producing antibodies, inflamed capillaries. And this is all what I'm suspecting is happening in the context of a prolonged infection in the GI tract. And this is important for us to be able to understand and to try and see if we can put the pieces together for long COVID and severe COVID-19 as well. And so, moving right along with regards to our principles, I just like to quickly share another concept with regards to what had happened here. Is that there's another interesting bit of information that I came across as well on LinkedIn, some really good stuff that I've seen. And it's about wastewater signals in Ontario. And here we have, and I'll put this on a full screen and get myself out of the way. And here we have these signals where they've been looking at the province-wide COVID-19 wastewater signals. What you can see here, this is a December 21, in case you can't read the writing. You can see here that by the 22nd, 29th of December, there was a peak with regards to Omicron. This would have been the wastewater signals. And remember what I was just telling you about RNA in the fecal matter. So this would fit with the fact that Omicron was spreading, and this was the peak in terms of Ontario, Canada. You then see a fall off, gradual fall off down to a baseline. And what we're seeing now, starting from about the 16th of March, this persistent rise at the moment, this in dark, in solid color, is complete data. Incomplete data is in dotted lines. So the projection or the trajectory that they're thinking is likely to continue to rise as we are going into April. And remember what we said about the RNA signals in fecal matter. This suggests that the population is becoming more infected or prolonging the infection, which would be what would be happening with the second wave of Omicron. So really, really interesting stuff that we have to try and get our heads around in terms of trying to understand where the next phase of the disease is going to go. So yes, just a reminder of what we have been saying in terms of the information. And I'll go back to my image here just so that you can see it again. The question was, could severe COVID-19 and long COVID be a disease of the gut? And that's the point that I'm trying to get across today. The evidence is starting to suggest that yes, it does look as though there could be more prolonged infection of the intestines. And this prolonged infection of the intestines could also be the main reason why we're seeing a long COVID going forward in such a significant proportion of the population. And here we have again the principle of the full thing. The virus infects the lungs first, then it spreads via the bloodstream to the intestines, primarily the small intestines where it infects. And then you will see the RNA of the virus in fecal samples. And based on this here, that RNA first is detected within about a week. There's a peak for the respiratory sample, but then that falls off quickly by about 2 weeks here. But the fecal peaks at about 2 weeks and then gradually starts to fall away over a period of, in some cases, up to 200 or 300 days. So there is the principle of what I'm trying to share with you today. And I just want to thank you all for joining me and for being interested. And I want to remind you, please consider joining me on Substack. Click on the link below if you want to hear up-to-date, latest thinking on COVID-19. And please join me on this journey. We've still got a lot of work to do. The pandemic is not over, and we'll keep you updated. Have a great evening to everyone, and I'll certainly be talking to you again with up-to-date research. Have a great evening.